Welcome to GRE. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Today is the day that I'm giving you our 2025 National Home Price Appreciation Forecast. You'll get the exact percent that I expect home prices to rise or fall next year. Learn the factors that really move prices. Importantly, I follow up and you get the results of previous year's forecasts too. Will it be a holly jolly forecast or more Grinch-like? Today on Get Rich Education. Mid-South homebuyers, they're total pros. With over 2 decades as the nation's highest-rated turnkey provider, their empathetic property managers use your ROI as their North Star, so it's no wonder that smart investors just keep lining up to get their completely renovated income properties like it's the newest iPhone. They're headquartered in Memphis and have globally attractive cash flows, an A-plus rating with the Better Business Bureau, and now over 5,000 houses renovated. There's zero markup on maintenance, let that sink in, and they average a 98.9% occupancy rate, while their average renter stays more than 3.5 years. Every home they offer has brand new components, a bumper-to-bumper 1-year warranty, new 30-year roofs, and, wait for it, a high-quality renter. Remember that part? And in an astounding price range, $100 to $180K. I've personally toured their office and their properties in person in Memphis. Get to know Mid-South. Enjoy cash flow from day one. Start yourself right now at midsouthhomebuyers.com. That's midsouthhomebuyers.com. Whenever you want the best written real estate and finance info, today's experience limits your free articles access, and it's got paywalls and pop-ups and push notifications and cookies disclaimers. It's not so great. So then it's vital to place nice, clean, free content into your hands that adds no hype value to your life. That's why this is the golden age of quality newsletters, and I write every word of ours myself. It's got a dash of humor, and it's to the point because even the word abbreviation is too long. My letter usually takes less than 3 minutes to read, and when you start the letter, you'll also get my 1-hour fast real estate video course. It's all completely free. It's called the Don't Quit Your Daydream letter. It wires your mind for wealth, and it couldn't be easier for you to get it right now. Just text GRE to 66866. While it's on your mind, take a moment to do it right now. Text GRE to 66866.
You're listening to the show that has created more financial freedom than nearly any show in the world. This is Get Rich Education.
Welcome to GRE, from Northport, Florida to North Pole, Alaska, and across 188 nations worldwide. I'm Keith Weinhold, and you are listening to Get Rich Education, episode 533. Yes, your favorite slack-jawed real estate podcaster here is indeed the GRE founder. I'm also an active Forbes Real Estate Council member, best-selling author. I write our weekly Don't Quit Your Daydream newsletter, and perhaps most importantly, I am an active real estate investor. I am here to help you invest well in real estate, and that is because most Americans have enough saved for an absolutely incredible single day of retirement. Look, the content that you choose to listen to will shape your behavior. It'll even gradually alter your identity over time and forge your dreams. Middle-class financial advice will keep you squarely in the middle class. They get robbed of the fruits of their labor through taxes, get robbed of their purchasing power through inflation, and they get robbed of their financial future by staying financially illiterate. If you're grinding hard and sacrificing experiences to be debt-free at 36, well, then that means you aren't using other people's money. It confirms that you've got no leverage. Why celebrate that? Celebrate financial freedom or a great vacation or, anything else like with your friends and family to the Canary Islands. I mean, that's stuff that's worth celebrating. That's extraordinary in this one and only life that you got. I love the old African proverb. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. You and I are on this journey together. Dream of living the life where you just give a light touch to some of your investments while they are building your wealth. Just adjust the sails of your ship a little here and there. Now, we'll get into the big picture real estate forces in my exact percent home price appreciation figure shortly, but doesn't that sound amazing? Where you can just do this. I mean, that's what I do. I just give a light touch to my investments. For example, at the beginning of this month, I looked at the statements as they came in emails from my property managers in various real estate markets, like I usually do. Now, when you have a perfect month as a real estate investor, us landlords, or should I say housing providers, acknowledging last week's show, we develop our own vernacular. A perfect month is when you have 100% rental occupancy and no repair items. Once, though, you have more than about 5 rental units, it's hard to ever have a perfect month. It's always good to budget something toward long-term vacancy and maintenance, but I had a pretty good month last month. For some reason, my properties needed a few new appliances, a replaced fridge here, a new microwave there. A lot of appliances, like a fridge, they can still look pretty close to new, even if they're used. That's fine for a rental. This was just a $280 fridge replacement, for example, in this one rental single-family home of mine. So yeah, just that monthly scan of your property manager statements, seeing that income and expenses look kind of reasonable to you, and then going about your day and the rest of your month. Now, it wasn't always that way for me. As I started and grew, I self-managed my own properties for the first 6 or 7 years. And sometimes, something will happen where I want to get more proactive and maybe take, say, a 90-minute block of time to shop for lower insurance premiums if I see those rates rising in a certain market or something like that. But that's how it feels to give a light touch to your active, direct real estate investments. Keep that going because this is all happening while you keep other people's money working for you, the banks, the governments, and the tenants. Well, hey, something that's become newsworthy. An index measuring consumer confidence in the housing market rose again last month. And that is the latest sign that potential property buyers and sellers are growing more accustomed to today's mortgage rates and prices. The Fannie Mae Home Purchase Sentiment Index, that has now increased to 75 points. So the index has risen 11 points, or more than 16% in the last year. So there is, however, not one shred of evidence, for example, that sub 3% mortgage rates are coming back anytime soon. Maybe not even in this decade or in your entire lifetime. Who really knows? I mean, it's soon going to be 3 years since the Fed began their aggressive rate hiking cycle, and the market and consumer expectations are finally adjusting and settling down. And that right there, that factors in just a touch to the housing forecast that I'm going to deliver to you today. And before I get into that, since we are Get Rich Education, do you know what the federal funds rate is? Like what it really means? Let me explain this to you in a way where I think you'll not only learn, but I'm going to give you an example so that you can actually remember it. And I'm going to oversimplify it. The federal funds rate, that thing that Jerome Powell and his committee set, that is the rate that banks pay other banks to borrow from each other. It's a little over 4% right now. Okay, let's just say it's 4%. Here's why the federal funds rate is typically lower than mortgage rates. Say that Wells Fargo pays Bank of America this 4% federal funds rate to borrow so that Wells Fargo can then turn around and lend the funds to you for a real estate mortgage loan. All right, well, now you can see that Wells Fargo had to pay Bank of America 4%. That's why when you go get your real estate loan from Wells Fargo, you can understand and see why they'd have to charge you, say, 7% in order to make a spread. That is why mortgage rates are higher than the federal funds rate. Wells Fargo made the spread of 3% because they borrowed at 4 and they lent it to you at 7. And you yourself, you borrowed at 7 because your tenant pays your interest and principal for you, and you get the leverage and all of the other benefits. So again, the federal funds rate is the rate that banks pay when they borrow from other banks. And since they need to make a spread, arbitrage, this is why mortgage rates are higher. Again, that's oversimplified, but I think that's a way where you can really remember what that is and why that is that way. All right, well, with that lesson understood, let's talk about the big national home price forecast for next year. And here's what's interesting. Look at the forecasts that my peers have made. All right, I've already got the forecasts from 16 other housing analytics platforms here, and they have all predicted that home prices will rise next year. All 16 of them, but they've all forecast something different. And everything we're discussing today, by the way, is nominal, meaning not inflation adjusted. All right, note that the average of all these platforms, all 16 of them, is a 2.8% gain for next year. All right, if you look at all of them, the range, the highest is Goldman Sachs at 4.4%, and the lowest is Moody's Analytics at just 0.3%. I'll tell you now that my forecast today, it wouldn't even fit on this chart. It is going to be off the chart, and this is something that might ramp up your intrigue. Maybe you think I would look at this and choose something safe, and since I have the benefit of seeing how 16 others have weighed in, that I'll just pick something in the middle of that. Oh no, not at all. This is an independent forecast. So since our forecast is off the chart, then that means that what I'm going to tell you today either has to be higher than the highest, which is that 4.4% from Goldman Sachs, or lower than the lowest, which is that 0.3% from Moody's. Yes, it is outside of those brackets, busting the bookends today. And as I lead up to it, I will detail the reasons why, the calculus that went into this forecast. So before we're done, yes, you will get the exact percent number that I expect existing single-family home values to increase by or decrease by next year. It is the 4th straight year that I'm doing this. And now, a lot of people make whimsical predictions, but today you're going to get something that you rarely, if ever, get. Accountability. Because I'm also going to show you the results. You'll see how well my forecasts have actually performed each of the past 3 years. Sheesh, don't you wish everyone followed up on the prediction that they made? Now, oh gosh, most housing price crash predictions fail faster than your average New Year's resolution. All right, we need first historic context in order to put this future that we're talking about into perspective. Let's look at how bad other predictions have been. This is something that Yahoo Finance recently pointed out. The year-by-year reasons that people thought housing prices would crash since 2012. So we're talking about the past 13 years here. Starting in 2012, it was shadow inventory. Remember that? That never came true. 2013, higher mortgage rates. 2014, in that year, people thought that housing prices could tumble hard because QE was ending in October of that year. That is quantitative easing, which is dollar printing. I mean, basically QE, that's just the genteel way of saying inflation. In 2015, they thought a manufacturing recession would make home prices crash. In 2016, home prices were back to their pre-global financial crisis high. Well, people thought that seemed shaky. In 2017, I don't know what it was. No one had a good reason, but the word crash just gets attention, so some media tried to scare people with that headline anyway. In 2018, it was mortgage rates went from 4% up to 5%. Seriously, like that was the top reason. In 2019, it was that home price growth was cooling off. In 2020, of course, it was the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2021, it was mortgage forbearance. In 2022, it was that mortgage rates hit 7%. That was the first time we saw those in a while, even though 7% is still below the long-term average of 7.75%. In 2023, it was historically low housing demand. People thought that would bring down real estate prices. In 2024, it was sustained higher mortgage rates and an uptick in inventory. And what's it going to be in 2025? I don't know. Clickbait artists will have some other farcical reason why home prices will crash. Just watch. All right, well, with that look back, every year since 2012, of course, real estate prices definitely don't always go up. In fact, when we look at a longer-term history, the national home price appreciation rate every year since World War II, like I told you on a previous episode, there were only 2 periods where home prices fell. That's over a period of 80 to 85 years. There was just 1% attrition in 1990, and then the only appreciable loss period, of course, were those years around the 2008 global financial crisis, where you really probably could consider that an all-out crash. Prices were down more than 20% nationally, more than 40%, 50% in some markets. All right, well, how did that concerning period compare to now? Well, 2008 is when conditions were largely opposite of what they are now. That is back 2008 when we had an oversupply of homes, and it was all supported by poorly underwritten mortgages, meaning the borrower really couldn't afford the payment, and also that's when people had low or no equity in homes, so they just walked away. So borrowers had no equity to lose, nor any credit score to protect, and it was oversupplied there about 17 years ago. I mean, that era was so bad and also such an anomaly that home prices actually fell below the replacement cost, if you can believe that, meaning that you could ostensibly buy existing property for less than the cost that it would take to build a property then. All right, well, all 3 of those conditions are opposite now. Today, we have an undersupply of homes. Secondly, we have carefully underwritten mortgages. And thirdly, we have record high equity positions, about 300K on average. People are not walking away from that unless things got absolutely dire. All right, with that historical context, so here we are building up to my factors for the forecast and then the big reveal of the percent figure here before we're done. To be clear, what I'm providing is the projected sales price of existing single-family homes per the National Association of Realtors stat set. All right, so why existing and not include the new builds into that? Well, first of all, there are way more existing home sales than there are new build sales each year. And see, the thing is, though, that tracking new build, that really skews the numbers. Because what can happen is one year you might have a ton of luxury new build homes. Well, then that skews the numbers up too much. Or then there's the more nascent trend of what's happening lately, building smaller homes this past year in order to help with affordability. And building smaller, that can skew the numbers down. So sticking with existing homes, that allows us to keep things more same. Today you'll learn about what goes into my forecast and the factors that actually don't matter as much as you would think, like the incoming Trump administration. You'll also hear an important clip from Trump in a few minutes. For the second week in a row, I'm bringing you the show from a fairly interesting place, Anchorage, Alaska. This city of 300,000 people is at sea level. The west side is confined by a coast. The east side is confined by mountains. It's a modern U.S. city. There are high-rise buildings and convention centers and freeways and a really convenient international airport. What's interesting about being in America's northernmost city right now, Anchorage, is that Saturday, just a couple of days ago, that was the winter equinox for half of the globe, the entire northern hemisphere. And here, the sunrise time is about 10:15 a.m. and sunset about 3:45 p.m. That right there is just 5.5 hours of daylight. That's it. But it feels like more than that. It feels closer to perhaps 7+ hours of daylight because at high latitudes, the sun barely drops below the horizon. So therefore, you get more twilight on either end of sunrise and sunset. Well, this is a real estate show, so I hope that's not too much of an astronomy lesson for you here, but Anchorage can never get 24 hours of daylight or darkness because it simply is not far enough north. In fact, when I fly from, say, the center of the 48 states out here, I travel more west than north. The thing for you to remember is that the only places on the globe that can get 24 hours of daylight and darkness are inside the Arctic and Antarctic circles. They're at 63 1/3 degrees of latitude or greater, and Anchorage is just 61. I've been skiing here, but suffice to say, with a lot of darkness, it's been a good place for me to study, research, and put my effort into this forecast that I'm sharing with you today, which you'll hear after the break. This week's episode is supported by Ridge Lending Group. It's the same place where I get my investment property mortgages and refinancings. You can go ahead and originate your loans at the same place I get mine. That is ridgelendinggroup.com. Also, Freedom Family Investments. You can make a loan and get a stable return of 7%, 8%, or even 10%, yet still have some measure of liquidity. Why park your funds at a bank? You can learn about their private money loans by texting family to 66866. If you want 8% or more on your money, while it's on your mind, just text family to 66866 and see if it's right for you. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. More next. You're listening to Get Rich Education. Oh, geez. The national average bank account pays less than 1% on your savings, so your bank is getting rich off of you. You've got to earn way more, or else you're losing your hard-earned cash to inflation. Let the liquidity fund help you put your money to work with minimum risk. Your cash generates up to a 10% return and compounds year in and year out instead of earning less than 1% in your bank account. The minimum investment is just $25K. You keep getting paid until you decide you want your money back. Their decade-plus track record proves they've always paid their investors 100% in full and on time. And you know how I know? Because I'm an investor in this myself. Earn 10% like me and GRE listeners are. Text FAMILY to 66866 to learn about Freedom Family Investments Liquidity Fund on your journey to financial freedom through passive income. Text family to 66866. Hey, you can get your mortgage loans at the same place where I get mine at Ridge Lending Group, NMLS 42056. They provided our listeners with more loans than any provider in the entire nation because they specialize in income properties. They help you build a long-term plan for growing your real estate empire with leverage. You can start your pre-qualification and chat with President Chaley Ridge personally. Start now while it's on your mind at ridgelendinggroup.com. That's ridgelendinggroup.com.
This is Rich Dad Advisor Tom Wheelwright. Listen to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold and don't quit your daydream.
Welcome back to GRE. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold, with the factors that are weighing into my home price appreciation determination for next year here. Now, all of these factors matter, but I'm generally going to start with less weighty factors and proceed more toward the weighty factors. Trump tariffs. Could Trump tariffs increase materials costs, the cost of materials that go into homes? Well, yes, of course they could. Could it also increase the labor costs that go into those homes if, say, businesses decide to onshore in order to avoid paying the tariffs? Yes, and you would have to pay a higher wage to Americans. That's obviously inflationary. But applying tariffs is slow and it takes a long time to trickle through. Okay, but here's the thing. Even the threat of tariffs can produce inflation, and we already have the threat. That's something real and now. See, if you're a consumer and you want to buy a new washer dryer set or a microwave, well, you're more motivated to do that today, not in a year, because this threat of tariffs might mean that that appliance's price will spike. You might want to buy your new car now if you anticipate that tariffs could be coming and it's going to affect that. Well, the apartment building owner feels the same way before she or he buys 48 washer dryers for their apartment building. Home builders and remodelers, they want to get their materials orders in now in some cases, whether that's for concrete, drywall, lumber, any component that goes into a home where they think that a tariff could jack up the price. You really need to be paying attention to whether you think this is going to happen or not. So Trump likely means more inflation, and that correlates also with sustained higher interest rates of all kinds, including mortgage rates. And there's no certainty there. There is just that correlation. Now, a lot of real estate investors anticipate that a president with a real estate investor background like Trump has, he is going to return 100% bonus depreciation and extend his tax breaks. Okay, all of these things, especially that bonus depreciation, can really enhance your tax situation. But that's not part of the home price appreciation forecast for next year. Okay, we're just looking at next year here. How about mortgage rates? How is that going to factor into home prices for next year? Mortgage rates hardly matter. And the newer listener that you are, the more of a surprise that is. Rates are about 7% now. A lot of experts think they're going to go to 6% in a year, but who knows? I mean, a year ago, everyone thought rates would be substantially lower today. But here's the thing. It's not just a who knows, it's almost a who cares about what mortgage rates will be when it comes to prices. Because like I've shared with you before, since 1994, mortgage rates have risen 1% or more 7 different times, and home prices went up all 7 times. Longtime listeners like you already know this. So for the complete backstory on the why, you can listen to earlier episodes, but the short story is that higher rates, you got to look at what's happening when there are higher rates. That's a confirmation that the economy is strong. And when the economy is strong and people feel secure in their job, what do? They buy a home. So mortgage rates matter, but a person's personal economy matters more when they make a decision to buy a home or not. A sharp fall in rates, that correlates with a recession. So higher rates usually lead to higher home prices, something that almost everyone in real estate thinks of oppositely. On weeks with lower rates this year, we did have lower housing inventory, and with higher rates, we had higher inventory. So that did affect that. The next factor is more important than tariffs and mortgage rates, and that is Trump and immigration. Okay, because this affects the supply versus demand component of housing, something supremely important. Well, more immigrants mean more housing demand, pushing up prices. And on immigration, who really knows how many of this surge of fresh immigrants are going to be deported? Will it only be the illegals, or will it be others, or will it be none at all, or will it be something else? Will Trump deport everyone? I mean, that is not easy to do, and it's really expensive. Here are Trump's latest public remarks on how he's going to treat recent immigrants to the U.S. The interviewer is Kristen Welker from NBC, and she's heard shuffling some papers here too, so don't let that throw you off as you listen to Trump.
You raised the point that the logistics are complicated. You said it yourself. You would
but everything's complicated.
Yeah, you need 24 times more ICE detention capacity just to deport 1 million people per year, not to mention more agents, more judges, more planes. Is it realistic to deport everyone who's here illegally?
You have no choice. First of all, they're costing us a fortune. But we're starting with the criminals, and we got to do it. And then we're starting with others, and we're going to see how it goes.
Well, before Trump's first day in office for his second term, he's already saying we'll see how it goes with deporting immigrants. He now realizes how costly that is. If there is mass deportation, housing demand goes down, but we'd also have fewer laborers, which a lot of those immigrants are, to build the new housing that our country needs. So there's somewhat of a canceling out effect there. It could mean higher home prices because most fresh immigrants are renters. They aren't occupying homes that they own anyway. And just how many people we're talking about here? The Pew Research Center estimates that 13% of construction workers are undocumented. That disruption to the labor market, that can produce higher inflation because a slowdown in home building means less supply and higher prices. Now let's get to the biggest factor before I provide my track record and then the big number, and that is more on the housing supply versus demand. So yeah, it's really fundamental economics. That's the core driver of next year's anticipated home price change. All right, let's start with supply. How undersupplied of housing are we still in the U.S.? Well, an update on the Fred active listing count, and this is for single families, condos, and townhomes, it's that we are up off the bottom, but we're still a good 40% or so below the equilibrium point where demand meets supply. America grew its available inventory 27% this year, pretty significant. And next year it might grow another 15 or 20%. That's my best guess. All right, then, well, let's try to project future supply. By what you have to do is look at new housing starts. That means shovels in the ground. That means taking a backhoe and excavating for spread footings, digging that trench that you're going to pour concrete into, starting homes from the ground up. Well, we don't have enough starts either. Not enough. In fact, we could be digging a deeper hole with the undersupply. At our current level of building, U.S. housing undersupply will grow by over 200,000 homes per year if we continue at this low level of building. And when you consider all housing types, single-family homes, apartments, mobile homes, condos, ADUs, everything, Freddie Mac estimates that we are currently undersupplied by a whopping 3.7 million housing units. Now, you probably heard figures like that before, but let me put it into perspective. At 2 persons per home, our shortage is greater than what could house the entire population of Libya. That's what we're talking about here. And some agencies estimate we're even more undersupplied than the 3.7 million homes. Now, of course, I'm making only a national forecast today. There are regional variations. In some Texas and Florida submarkets, they have built plenty of new build single-family homes. Now, let me tell you something scary. What if your income dropped by a third, making 1/3 less in the future than you do right now? Like, that would be a moment of panic for a lot of people, you and your family. As you hold that thought, when it comes to supply, this year had historically low home sales. When I talk about sales, these are not prices. This is different. This is the volume of sales. Next year, there will likely only be a few more sales than this year, and there weren't many this year. Now, see, for you, as an individual real estate investor and a consumer that goes grocery shopping, you are interested in real estate prices. But the industry, if you work in the industry, like as a builder or as a real estate agent or even a furniture provider, They are more concerned about the number of home sales, this sales volume that I'm talking about. And here's what's going on. Normal is about 5 million home sales per year. It was over 6 million during the pandemic, and now we're down at 4 million. So, I mean, in a short period of time, to go from 6 million down to 4 million, that is a drawdown of transactions by a third. So just imagine if you are a home builder or a real estate agent or you're in the retail furniture business and your volume is down by a third. I mean, what would happen to you if your income were down by a third and you're in one of those industries and you don't have a way to pivot? So that is scary stuff for that subset of people. Well, while all of that was happening to sales volume, lower and lower volume, home prices have just kept ticking up these past few years. All right, well, that was supply. And there is one last factor to weigh before I reveal the forecast number, and that is demand. There is a long way to go before there is enough housing inventory for the pent up demand in the housing market. Pent up demand from these people that can't quite afford a home. Demographics is destiny. You know, it is one of the easiest things to project because demographics is a known. Forget immigration here because I already talked about that. Just domestically, the U.S. had its own high birth rate years from 1990 to 2010. And most people don't know about this. Many of those years, between 1990 and 2010, there were over 4 million births annually, and that peaked in the year 2007. All right, you might be wondering, so what? That's the past. What about the future? Well, in housing prices, that right there is the future. With today's first-time homebuyer now being a record 38 years old, like I told you about a few episodes ago, all right, if you add 38 to the year that they were born, 2007, that homebuyer demand won't peak until the year 2045. So that is a big part of where the demand just keeps coming from and is going to keep coming from. This wave of demographic demand that might not slow down much until the 2050s. And what could slow prices is if a major recession that included a lot of job losses were imminent. That could slow home price growth, but nobody expects that. And you know something? On future demand, what if health and fitness influencer Brian Johnson is right and Earth now has the first generation not to die? What would that do to real estate prices? Have you ever thought that through? That would really expand housing demand, but that wouldn't affect things for a couple decades. All right, well, let's talk track record and understand that it is pretty difficult to predict the future. And I have made all these forecasts at the end of one year, just before the forecast year even starts, just like I'm doing today. And here's how I've done. At the end of 2021, for 2022, I forecast 9 to 10% home price appreciation. The year ended, and in 2022, they came in at 10%. So I got that one right. For 2023, before that year even began, I forecast 0%, just that home prices would stay flat. And by the way, so many people were calling for a housing price decline that year because mortgage rates had risen. But as we know here on the show, when mortgage rates rise, home prices typically do too. And I also said back then, with supply so low, I don't really see how home prices could fall. Well, the year ended, and sure enough, they came in at 0%. And all of this is published and on record. You can go back and find all this. In fact, for 2024, you can hear the forecast that I made near the end of last year for 2024. And you could do that by going back and listening to episode 481. This is episode 533. That was 52 weeks ago. And you will hear that my forecast back then for this year's home price appreciation was 4%. This year is not quite over, plus housing data lags somewhat. In fact, through October, however, they were 4.1%. We've almost got that November number, not quite, but it's very likely going to end up being 4% this year, just like I had forecast at the end of last year, but it's still officially to be determined. Before I give the awaited fresh forecast for next year, with what looks to me like really nailing the forecast spot on 3 years in a row now, you might be wondering something. How did I know? How did I have the foresight to know that and nail those forecasts? At this point, I have to concede that there's probably a little luck that has come into play, but this is what I do. I study, research, and even participate in the national residential housing market. What you're getting is my best estimate. It's not any sort of promise or guarantee. I mean, like all other 8.1 billion human beings on Earth, I don't have a crystal ball, and a streak like this has gone on for 3 years, but it cannot go on forever. So this is what I can best surmise. So really, for 2025, the short story is that I expect more buyers than homes, which creates bids and buoyant prices. I also expect continued inflationary pressure. Those are the two chief factors that went into this. We don't ever revise our forecast mid-year. This is it. For 2025, I expect home prices to increase by 5%. Yes, there it is, 5% projected appreciation for next year. And to be clear, that is the NAR's national median existing single-family home price, the same stat set that I have cited all 4 years. Again, it is nominal, meaning not inflation adjusted. So at Christmas or New Year's or your next dinner party, when you see your slack-jawed brother-in-law that thinks the housing market is always going to crash, give the dude a hug and a turkey leg and tell him that I expect plus 5% and pass me the wishbone for good luck on our fourth consecutive housing price appreciation forecast. I really hope that this helps with planning your own portfolio moves, whether that's you owning more income property next year or doing a refinancing, or how you think about your own primary residence. And do you like the forecast that I've done here near the end of each year ever since 2021? If you do, let us know, write us, or leave us voicemail at getricheducation.com/contact. Let me know. You can always get a hold of us there year-round with any type of feedback or questions. Hey, if you appreciate the show here, do you think that you could help me out in one small way? Call it my Christmas gift request. There's only one item on my Christmas list, and it should only take a couple minutes of your time and none of your money. Leave a podcast rating and review for the Get Rich Education podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen. The rating is the 5-star thing. The review is a few short sentences about why you like the show. I would really appreciate the gift from you, and I will read your review myself too. If you don't know how to do it right inside those listener apps, just open up a browser tab and search how to leave an Apple Podcast review or Spotify podcast review or whatever platform you prefer to listen on. It would feel like a little Christmas gift to me. After all these years, I'd love your feedback given that way. Tell me what you think, and thanks. From me and the entire team here at GRE, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. Until next week, I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Don't quit your daydream.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.
The preceding program was brought to you by your home for wealth building, GetRichEducation.com.